Ken Carson is going to surpass Playboi Carti, and here's why. Just kidding, gotcha. But I'm not even joking when I say that there are clusters of Opium, Ken Carson, and Carti fans that believe that Ken Carson is going to surpass Carti. They really believe it. They believe the music is better, he's more consistent, some even think he's a better performer, and that ultimately he will eclipse Carti commercially. Yes, you heard me. There really are a lot of people that think this. And at first, I totally wrote it off. I mean, can you blame me? But now, I kind of see where they're coming from and why they may think this. So I'm going to be explaining whether or not Ken Carson will surpass Playboi Carti. This includes where he is right now, why fans feel this way, and ultimately, how far his potential in hip-hop really lies. So let's get into it. Alright, before we even start, we have to think, where is Ken Carson now? Where was Carti respectively in his career at Ken Carson's position? How they were put into the game? And of course, where Ken Carson can go. So let's start off. I would say that Playboi Carti's underground phase remained all the way, until he dropped his album Self-Titled, which dropped in the end of 2017. What a lot of people don't know is this project actually dropped the same day Kendrick Lamar dropped Damn, which was like the biggest project of that year. I think it had the #1 single too. And Playboi Carti's Self-Titled sold 28,000 units, which for his first album under Interscope and for the sound album had, not too shabby. Obviously, this album has probably sold way more now because of who Carti has become. But for first week sales, those aren't insane and those aren't terrible. Another thing you have to understand about 2017 is 2017 was a great year for music, you know? I think Drake dropped an album. He always drops an album. Lil Uzi dropped Love is Rage 2, which by the way was way bigger than Carti at the time. Uzi was way more commercially successful at the time. Tyler, the Creator dropped. The Migos dropped Culture. That was huge. That was like when the Migos were at their peak, you know, like 2017, 2018. Like 21 Savage dropped his album. Future was on his, like, the end of his, like, little, like, not little, but it's his big run. You gotta understand, this was a monster year for rap music. 2016, 2017, it's like, whoa. Anyways, Carti he played a very small role in this. Another thing you have to understand is this is like his first album, like real album. And I think if we're being fair, because Ken Carson has dropped multiple projects in the past. He dropped his first album, which had Yale, or I guess EP or whatever, and then he's dropped some more. I would say Ken Carson's first project where people really had their eyes on him was Project X, okay? We're not gonna count anything before that. And a lot of those are like tapes, so it's just genius. It's how they do it. Anyways, Project X did not make it to the Billboard 200. It did not even sell close to 5,000. It was kind of like a niche tape. Yes, you could say it was very influential with underground, but you know, we're talking about surpassing Playboi Carti, all right? That's peanuts compared to, you know, what his potential is apparently supposed to be. So first off, their debut albums already aren't really lining up. Of course, you gotta understand, you can't just compare it one to one, you know? At the end of the day, they're not the exact same thing. Everybody's journey is different. It doesn't really like mean just because, oh, he was here back then, he's gonna be here, or who's here, or he's not gonna be here, right? That's how it works. Another thing you have to know is that Playboi Carti, you understand the way he came to, or rose to where he is today, is by snaking people left and right, all right? If Carti was working in like the corporate world, this guy would be like a CEO or like a director by now, because like he knows how to play the game, you know? He began in Awful Records, or before that I believe he was with this boy Ethereal, who's also part of Awful, but you know, Awful had Father, and then he started messing with ASAP and this and that, you know what I mean? So he kept swerving or swiveling and snaking his way up to the top, all right? And the way he did this was he jumped from click to click to click. You know, he also had Splur Gang with Fonny and Uno, and you know, he was very underground for a long time. That was like the Cash Carti era or whatever, you know, when we were all in recess. Ken Carson doesn't really have that. You know, Ken Carson's beginning was very manufactured, and if it was by any other artist, people would, you know, by the same definition, they would call Ken Carson industry plant. So he never really had like that he kind of did when he was dropping Yale and stuff. He was relatively unknown, but he was never like underground. Does that make sense? I mean, he kind of was, but that was before he signed to Carti, and he was kind of like a nobody, if that makes sense. No offense. Carti kind of like motion like that underground scene, if that makes sense. So already Carti's got a leg up on him because he got it himself. Anyways, after Self-Titled, the next year, or in 2018, May of 2018, by the way, so he dropped kind of close to Self-Titled, Carti sold 60K. So clearly there had been a jump in his popularity, and he did pretty well for himself. You know, 60K is good. For reference, Ken Carson's A Great Chaos just sold 50-something K, all right? The other thing you gotta realize is when Die Lit dropped, people actually did not mess with it as much as Self-Titled. When Self-Titled dropped, there was Woke Up Like This, there was Magnolia. Those songs really started to wave, those Pierre Bourne beats. Like, that was when Carti was at his cultural height in this little era. And this is an important piece of context you need to understand if you weren't there. I'm guessing a lot of Ken Carson fans are younger, right? So, trying to explain. Anyways, so Ken Carson her sales for AGC can kind of be compared to Die Lit, all right? But let's look at Carti when he was at that Die Lit era. He was still like very associated with A$AP Rocky. Now, right after Die Lit, is where like Carti became the Carti you kind of know now. Not really, but he kind of did, because that's when he started lying about drops. That's when all these leaks started happening. That's when I guess you could say he got gayer or zestier or whatever. He got like cooler, I guess, and he changed his sound. He had the baby voice. He did this. He had all these eras, and that's when like the real cult following started to forge, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? And he did that for like 2 years, and then finally on Christmas 2020, he dropped Whole Lotta Red. And I don't need to explain from there, but Whole Lotta Red debuted at #1 on the Billboard charts. Very unexpected for Carti, okay? You gotta understand, when an artist takes so long to drop an album, they either flop really badly or people are just very confused, because it's very hard to predict these numbers, because the way they oversell or sell higher than expected is they gain a lot of fans through the period when they haven't dropped. And that's clearly what happened with Carti. However, 100K isn't a monster sales album. Does it make sense? It's not. I think it sold like 100, 115K. It's not a monstrous first week sales. It was great. You know, it was really good. I think Lil Durk's album still outsold him, for context, because, you know, Lil Durk is more of like a mainstream rapper. I'm sure by now Carti's album has far exceeded Lil Durk's sales that year, or whatever album he dropped that year, but you get the point, right? So he sold 100K. However, the inspiration behind that album, that was like the last mainstream inspirational album, if that makes sense. Like, you know, like influential album. I don't always say inspiration. Like, that was the last influential mainstream album. There hasn't been one since, okay? And by the way, there are very few of those, of course, but that was the last one, okay? But hey, you know, you may be saying, hey, you know, influence doesn't really matter. Look at Young Thug and Gunna. You know, this is one of the few cases where somebody who's signed to an artist is actually bigger than them. Because I'm just going to go to that point. That was another one of my points. And I'll just bring it up now. But, you know, if an artist is signed to another artist, the chances of them eclipsing said artist are very, very, very low. Because you gotta understand, like, for example, with Travis Scott and his, like, Cactus Jack crew, it's more so a part of his aesthetic to have these rappers, and they kind of just like compliment him rather than him trying to like blow these rappers up. Or look at like Gucci Mane, where I guess he just has made bad decisions with signing people, or Drake with OVO, or Future with Free Bands, or Lil Baby with 4PF. Like, none of these rappers are even gonna come close to the rapper they're signed to. In comparison, Ken Carson has done really well. Of course, there's one major exception: Gunna and Young Thug. You know, and I'm talking about like modern rappers, not from the past. Gunna has consistently outsold Young Thug. A lot of mainstream fans think he's better, and you can even say, some even say he makes better music. But of course, Young Thug is way more influential. So maybe, you know what, influence, that shit doesn't matter. What about just pure sales? What about just pure likability? And I'm not gonna lie, this is where the strongest argument can be made. Because right now, okay, so I'm gonna make an analogy, and you may or may not get it, all right? We all have a homie that's like kind of into fashion, right? You know, when they first start dressing, they start like going on, I don't know, they go cop some pieces or whatever. They think it's kind of hard. Then year after year, it starts evolving, right? And in their like 4th or 5th year in, it just goes from an acquired taste to an even more acquired taste to an even more acquired taste, to the point where they're like wearing thongs and like doing all sorts of shit. You're like, what do you mean, bro? This is fat. It's like, nah, dude, you don't get it, bro. It's like, this is like, what are you wearing, bro? You know what I mean? And that's kind of what Carti's music has turned to. It's went from like pretty regular, not regular, it went from like SoundCloud rap to like a little, like a really like cool SoundCloud rap to like more mainstream SoundCloud rap to like kind of different to like, oh, this is really different, for especially for the mainstream palette. You know, we're talking about a Whole Lotta Red. To like now it's like, whoa, but he's built such a big audience and fan base that he's able to do that. Okay, Ken Carson, he has kind of undergone this as well. You know, he kind of went from like that, I would say like fruity, upbeat, happy like sound, and he realized, wait, I can't really keep doing this sound, so he switched it up with AGC. Perfectly great execution. And right now, I do believe that, yes, Ken Carson's music is more like listenable. If you took a random person and they didn't know Ken Carson, they didn't know Playboi Carti, and you played them like something from AGC or something from one of these like I Am Music snippets, they'd probably, like, if you played them like Hood by Air or like Ketamine or like Hood by Air or Evil Jordan, and you played like Overseas or something, like they would mess with that song. Mewtwo, I mean, that's from his deluxe, or Nightcore, or anyone. You know what I mean? Like, Ken Carson's got a more listenable sound. Now, it's not by a huge margin. It's not by a huge amount. You know, it's not like, oh my God, this is way more. It's just like a little bit. All right. The next thing is, you know, by the way, Carti, you know, he's kind of known to have an ego. So for him to allow one of his artists to surpass him. That's not happening. And that brings me to my next point. You know, Carti only got to where he is now by snaking from click to click, you know, jumping, you know, like playing shoots and ladders or something. You know, he didn't just get there by accident. He knew what he was doing. Maybe not in the beginning, but Carti has always done what's best for him, and he's always left groups or done whatever just based on how his career would do as a result, right? So I personally think the only way Ken Carson has a shot at going to a level higher than Carti's is he has to jump ship. He has to go independent. He has to be his own artist. You understand, as long as he's on Opium, he's Carti's little bro. Even though they're only 4 or 5 years apart. 4 or 5 years in rap is huge, you know. 5 years ago was 2019. You know, 2019 was a completely different landscape from now. So I think if he drops maybe one last album under the Opium label, under Interscope, and says, hey, I'm my own person now, I don't think Carti would accept that at all. He could have a shot at becoming bigger or even just as big, and just as big would be good for him. And here's the thing why I think this would actually be very interesting for him. As we've seen earlier, you see when Ken Carson first began dropping, he was going by the whole mysterious thing. It was clear Carti was like, hey, do this, do that, and he made all the right moves. Perfect. Everything he did, I'm not gonna go through it, but they executed that so perfectly. Really good. Anyways, he was doing the whole mysterious shit, but recently, like the past 6 months to a year, Ken Carson has been doing tons of press, tons of media. I mean, Destroy Lonely too, and he's just been himself, which has been so like anti-Opium, or what that whole like group used to stand for, where it's like mysterious, we moved here. You know, Ken Carson's just been himself. So I think he's slowly, maybe not production-wise and like totally music-wise, but and the way he's dressing, but I think he's slowly like moving towards himself. You know, he's his own artist, and when you get so big, you can't just be somebody's little bro. You can't just be like fitting underneath this umbrella. You know, like Carti literally like performed and they were in a cage underneath him. Like you can't be like his pet anymore. You got to be your own person. I think if he really wants to see growth, like real growth, he has to leave. You know what I mean? Like I think if Ken Carson, Uzi dropped a project right now, Ken Carson can outsell Uzi, you know? Like Ken Carson has that potential. It's just I don't think he can do it underneath Carti. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Here's what we're overlooking though. A lot of Ken Carson producers are like Carti producers. You know, Starboy, Out of Town, they produce for Carti too. Obviously they produce more for Ken because he's dropped more, but a lot of the infrastructure that Ken relies on, you know, his management, I'm sure a lot of like the creative people around him, they're all from Carti. So him just leaving, it would kind of cause a rift and people would have to pick sides. Who are they going to pick sides? Carti can't. You know, you have to think about things like that as well. You'd also have to think like realistically, like you don't really know what's going on behind the scenes and this and that. But, you know, he can't really pass Carti because Carti has so many years on him. The other thing is you can never beat the inspiration really when it's this close. You know what I mean? Like I'll give you an example. Like Osama-san could never be bigger than Carti, because at least not with what he's doing now, because it's so reminiscent of Carti. Or like Ken Carson could never beat Carti because it's like he's just like one order away. You know what I mean? Like he couldn't. So no, I don't think that. However, let's go over the Reddit threads and the fans who believe that Ken Carson could. So one person said, is Ken becoming a better performer than Carti? After watching Ken's Rolling Loud performance yesterday, I'm starting to prefer watching him perform over Carti. Ken puts a little more effort than Carti, and Carti just screams while the track plays in the background. At least Ken runs around low. You can barely see Carti at the time. I agree. When I saw him at Summer Smash, you could barely see Carti. The thing is, if you felt the energy of a Carti set versus a Ken set, it's crazy. It's insane. So I'm not even gonna entertain that. Ken Carson has surpassed Carti for me. Big emphasis on for me. He said, I'm more hyped for Ken than Carti. Honestly, that Bagloon lies too much and overseas is insane. Maybe I'm just out of touch, but musically, Ken isn't even on the same level as Carti or even that close. Carti was one of the driving forces of the entire SoundCloud generation when he was 17, and he's reinvented himself numerous times, and everything's changed the landscape. So this is a really good point. A lot of these people are acting like just what you're doing right now is like super important in the big picture. You understand, going up is very hard, but staying there is even harder. And Carti has done it multiple times. And the way this guy worded this comment was amazing, because it's true. You know, Carti has reinvented himself multiple times. You know, he didn't just come up, you know, and that's why he's so respected. That's why he's got a strong resume. You know what I mean? Ken just can't compete. The other thing is artistically, yeah, Carti is 100 times stronger than Ken. The other thing is we really do not know how much these fans are going to care about Opium after Carti drops. Like you really can't predict that, and I don't think it's going to be as strong as a lot of these people think. Some people are saying old Carti better than old Ken, new Ken is better than new Carti. You understand, new Ken has been lasting for like 6 months. So by the way, someone said, anyone else think Ken is better than Carti? Another thing is it's really hard to judge them because Carti, we've only seen like his throwaways or like little singles, and he's just testing the air. You know what I mean? Another thing is people just switch up so fast. You know, when Ken Carson first came out, bro, people hated him. people like they just thought his music was trash. You know, a lot of people were like, bro, this guy's overrated. And honestly, if you listen to like his earliest work, it wasn't very good. So it makes sense. Like they were not messing with Ken like that until like Project X, and now it's like, whoa, you know what I mean? So I think a lot of this is just fleeting. If you really think Ken Carson is gonna surpass Carti, you're wrong. And I will end off at one last thing. You gotta understand that with artists, it's not always the music that takes them to where they're at. A lot of the times it's their drive, it's the actual person. So like for Ken Carson to surpass Carti, he has to be smarter than Carti, he has to be more ambitious than Carti, he has to be more, I don't know what I was saying, like maybe earlier, like more corporate, maybe more slimy than Carti. He has to be more artistically driven than Carti, and he has to last longer than Carti. Doing either of those, just one of those, is gonna be very tough for him. For him to do all of it, in my opinion, it's impossible. But anyways, let me know what you think. To me, this argument is crazy. I don't know why people even think this is a thing. I think the only people who really believe this are people who just became like Carti fans like 1 or 2 years ago. Like, bro, come on. The disrespect is crazy. But anyways, thanks for watching. Have a nice day. I'm super tired right now. I'm about to up this DoorDash, but yeah. Oh, I meant to say I'm really hungry. I'm about to like destroy this DoorDash. But yeah, thanks for watching. Have a nice day. See you tomorrow. By the way, I do want to say huge thank you to everyone who watched that vlog and commented. I appreciate it a lot. I'm gonna do some more stuff, like some more vlogging stuff. I got another one in the vault I'm about to drop, so really appreciate you guys all. Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye. I said have a nice day bye like 3 times.